An entire civilization could die tonight. That was the warning, no, the threat, issued by Donald Trump just hours ago. A sitting American president openly declaring that bridges, power plants, and civilian infrastructure across Iran could be wiped out if Tehran refuses to comply. This is no longer a strategy. This is brinkmanship at the edge of annihilation. And yet, after more than a month of war, the reality on the ground tells a different story. American aircraft are being downed, military operations are facing resistance, and the rapid collapse of Iran never came. Instead, Europe is stepping back, China and Pakistan are stepping in, and even voices inside Washington are breaking ranks, including Robert Kagan, warning that the United States is becoming a rogue superpower, fighting a war it cannot win. So tonight, one question dominates. Is this still a war of strategy, a war of desperation? This question and more are put to our panel tonight in All 24 News Special shortly. Hello there, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to another special coverage on the war in Iran. And before we bring in our guest, here's the latest. Diplomatic pressure is rising, economic shockwaves are spreading, and what began as a regional conflict is now turning into a global stress test. At the same time, the rhetoric from Washington is heating up, but also losing clarity. Here's Zahra Farjani with more details.
The war in Iran has reached a new and dangerous phase, with tensions escalating beyond conventional battlefield strikes. US President Donald Trump has sparked global outrage after issuing one of his starkest warnings yet, threatening the destruction of what he described as an entire Iranian civilization. The warning came as a U.S. deadline for reopening the Strait of Hormuz expired, with no agreement in sight. Shortly after the statement, U.S. forces struck military targets near Iran's main oil export hub, increasing pressure on Tehran over the strategic waterway that carries nearly a fifth of global oil supply. Trump had earlier warned that Iran's infrastructure, including bridges and power plants, could be decimated if the blockade continues. Tehran responded with strong warnings of its own. Iran's Revolutionary Guard says any violation of its red line would trigger a response beyond the region, threatening to cut off oil and gas supplies to the United States and its allies for years. Meanwhile, Zionist airstrikes targeted multiple bridges across Iran, with state media reporting casualties after a railway bridge was hit in the city of Kashan. Iran retaliated by launching missiles and drones toward U.S. allied Gulf states. Saudi Arabia confirmed debris falling near energy facilities, while UAE reported incoming aerial threats. Inside Iran, reactions are mixed. Images circulating on local media show people forming human chains around bridges and power plants in apparent attempts to deter attacks. Diplomatic efforts appear to have stalled. Iran has withdrawn from negotiations after a proposed 45-day ceasefire was rejected by Washington. A separate Iranian peace plan reportedly received no response. At the United Nations, a resolution to ease tensions and reopen the Strait of Hormuz failed after Russia and China vetoed the measure in the Security Council.
The position of our country regarding the present-day crisis in the Middle East is principled, consistent, and objective in nature. We condemn the United States and Israel's aggression against Iran. We respect the sovereignty and territorial integrity of all countries in the region. It is regrettable, though, the draft resolution fails to capture the root causes and full picture of the conflict in a comprehensive and balanced manner. It contains one-sided condemnation and pressure, characterizing the situation to the threat to international peace and security, as well as the use of armed escorts.
With threats escalating, strikes intensifying, and diplomacy at a standstill, fears are growing that the conflict could expand far beyond the region.
And to break this down, we are joined tonight by Dr. Hamoud Salhi, Associate Dean and Professor of International Education at California State University, Dominguez Hills in Los Angeles. Hello there, Professor, and thank you for agreeing to be with us again.
Thank you, Karim, but I missed you the last 3 days, my friend.
Thank you indeed. And also joining us live is Dr. Khalid Al-Qasimi, Associate Professor of International Relations and Political Philosophy at the American University in the Emirates. Hello there, Professor, and thank you for being with us.
Pleasure to be with you all.
Thank you indeed. And also I am joined by Dr. Glenn Hole, geopolitical analyst and Middle East security expert, joining us from Oslo. Hello there, Professor, and thank you for being with us.
Thank you for having me. It's a great pleasure to be with you.
The pleasure is all ours. And also we are pleasured to be joined by Dr. Irfan Raja, political analyst and media specialist, joining us from London. We're having maybe a sound problem with him, but he's going to be joining us shortly. And also with me here in studio is Mohammed Krisasi, financial expert and geopolitical observer. Thank you, Mohammed Krisasi, for agreeing to be with us.
Thank you again for the invite and with the honorable guest. Thank you and welcome.
Thank you indeed. So let's start the discussion. We have just had this breaking news, Dr. Glenn Hole, that Donald Trump agreed to another extension, another delay of not striking Iran for another 2 weeks. How do you read this development?
I read. Do you hear me?
Yes, yes.
Yes, sir. I read this development.
Well, it seems that we lost the connection, so let me redirect the question to you, Dr. Hamoud Salhi. We just had this breaking news that President Donald Trump is no longer striking Iran tonight, but rather agreed to another extension, perhaps delaying the strikes for a possible arrangement. How do you read it?
I have to wait to see it, number one, and I have to see the language as well. But in hindsight, I could say that we hear some kind of negotiations, and the negotiations, that's some kind of agreement over a short period of time, and sort of a ceasefire, then move forward with another plan, with another negotiation to end the whole war. We have to take it with a grain of salt, Karim, for a number of reasons. There is another player that is another actor that is doing the work of the United States. If the United States' ultimate goal, which we've seen in the last few days or so, is to attack the petrochemical, the economic and social facilities, the power and energy, then their allies, Israel entity, is doing just that. So we've seen the events today, what's happening on the ground. That's one fact. The second fact, I think it has to do a lot with the recent, what you could interpret as a rescue mission. The rescue mission, which led to rescue the second soldier whose F-15 plane was shot down. And just to give you an example and link it to what we hear in the reports, at the time, the rescue of the American soldier was seen as euphoric, was celebratory. In one of the Arabic station satellite, there appeared for a last minute or an urgent news item from Iran. And that news item specifically stated that this mission was a failure. This caused a lot of sort of unease in the studio where I had other guests, specifically that everybody see that this is a success, however you interpret it. But if we put that in perspective, what we're hearing today and yesterday, then in fact the mission that they were, the planes that were there were not in a matter of reconnaissance, but they were there to take the island Kark and also take the uranium that was, according to the intelligence, stored in that area. So when the Iranians came out and said it's failure, it was a reference to the mission that initially came, that they were there for. These are reports that we could see more on it in later days. But here is the point. I feel that experience was that the United States or the Trump administration found it very, very beneficial. And they might have concluded that they need more time to prepare, that it was not that easy for them to take the territories and make it a success. That despite the appearance and all the propaganda that we see it wasn't that much of a success. And finally, I think a reason there is this change of mind is every time President Trump make certain kind of statement, either showing that the United States is okay, or that there is negotiation, the oil prices go a little bit higher. So by all estimate, the oil prices where they are now, they're actually much better what they were expecting, because they were expecting this to be at around 150 by this time. But the extension of it, and again, we have to see the exact text, how it's framed, has to do a lot with perhaps the revelation of what happened, this so-called rescue mission, give another sort of realizing that the Americans are not prepared. And the other thing, maybe something genuine, something very worth looking at in terms of the negotiation going on. And the last one, just to add, is that the American people are not, public in general, don't want to see the United States in this war. And more people now are saying this is not for America and we need to get out, and why my oil prices are higher. At certain places in California, those oil prices have doubled. We are talking about $7 a gallon, which previously was around $4 at the most in California. And other places also increased.
Mm-hmm. Thank you, Dr. Hamoud Salhi. And let me include Dr. Al-Qasimi with this latest development still. Dr. Al-Qasimi, from a U.S. strategic standpoint, how do you read it yourself? This war has been marked by repeated ultimatums, and just now we're having this breaking news, Trump saying that there's going to be a ceasefire from the two parts, and we are going to delay the strikes for 2 more weeks, and also they have proposed 10 points to come to an agreement with Iran. So all this shifting deadlines and escalating rhetoric inside the United States, does it signal perhaps strategic confusion, pretty much like we're confused here, or a pressure tactic that is beginning to backfire politically and militarily?
Well, once again, thank you for having me. I think yesterday in Donald Trump's speech, he actually amusingly said, a lot of people say, I don't have a plan, but the people here know I have a plan. Well, it seems from the shifts in deadlines, every other day we have new deadlines. There are specific deals that are being struck, supposedly. I think all of these highlight that the United States, as Dr. Salha mentioned, is actually benefiting financially in the stock markets from fluctuating, as you know, narratives directly influence stock prices. So that's one aspect to see it, that the war of narratives, because the battle is not simply in the battlefield, but it's also a virtual war of narratives. And there is this aspect of the stock markets, the Dow, the NASDAQ fluctuating because of these narratives. But at the same time, I do think that the shifts in narratives, which tend to seem contradictory, that's all part of psychological warfare as well. Some might argue, the Iranians might argue, that this is a sign of strength, that Iran is targeting the United States and the United States is confused. It's being surprised. the United States might reply to that and say, well, you know what, I'm giving diplomacy a chance, right? So, but on both ends, I think the most recent United Nations Security Council draft resolution, I think it is very interesting that the resolution was drafted by Bahrain after 2 weeks of watering down the language, because as we all remember, the first resolution that was advanced, that was contested by China and Russia, the language that was used was explicitly saying that we will take all necessary measures. So it was highly, if you want, offensive. The recent draft that was vetoed by Russia and China today, as a matter of fact, actually April 7th, because now I'm in Dubai, it's April 8th, just to be accurate for our viewers. That draft resolution actually included the language that Russia and China wanted. However, it was also vetoed by them. But what is interesting in this is that Pakistan abstained. Okay. Now, as we all know, Pakistan is one of the countries that is negotiating in Islamabad. And one of the 10-point plans that was given by Iran, highlighted that we want ultimate control and sovereignty over the Strait of Hormuz, which is a conversation that we can have maybe later on, because that's a huge discussion to have. Mm-hmm. But what I wanted to emphasize in relation to Pakistan abstaining is that language, that watered down language, which now says we will just adopt defensive measures and not offensive measures, is something that actually benefits Russia and China. Okay, and it actually aligns with the proposed plan by the Saudis, the Egyptians, and Turkey in Islamabad last week. So it seems like there is something being cooked. And when I say cooked, I mean it positively, something that is being analyzed and that is being formulated. And I think we need to connect Pakistan abstaining with there's something being formulated, which we can connect with why Donald Trump actually postponed the attacks. Mm-hmm. So I think right now that's where my analysis stands on this.
Thank you for that. And now let me include Dr. Irfan Raja. Dr. Irfan, one of the most perhaps striking developments that we have noticed recently is the shift among Western intellectual circles. Even figures like Robert Kagan now describe the United States as acting like a rogue superpower. Robert Kagan is not a marginal critique. He's one of the intellectual figures who helped shape interventionist U.S. thinking. He says America is acting like a rogue superpower and deepening global chaos. Now, how significant is it when the old hawks begin warning that the war is damaging U.S. legitimacy? And how do you explain this elite-level rupture in consensus around U.S. foreign policy? Dr. Irfan?
Hello. Thank you for having me. Yes. First of all, thank you for having me in your program. Since the start of the war, and even before, let's go back to Iraq war and the weapons of mass destruction and all that. There has always been, the contradicting voices. There has always been opposing voices to war. For some, war is a business. For some other people, campaigners, and the people who are there to raise their voices for peace. So it's always been, conflicting narratives, dissimilar narratives. So here in Britain, I give you examples, several officials, including officials and academics and journalists, campaigners, peace campaigners, have been resigning their jobs. We can give you an example of Professor David Miller, so many other people in different walks of life, who are with the view that there is the government stance on trying to ban voices, trying to ban protests. All these are aligning with the policies of government of Israel rather than the Western values. When we talk about British values, for instance, equality, human rights, freedom, these are all becoming empty slogans. So you're right in saying that there is a huge shift, not only in intellectual levels, but also in a public level. The official rhetorics are less and less becoming popular. And that's why one of the recent examples is you have seen that, the idea, the government ministers talking of, Palestine active, protesters, equating them, aligning them with terror, extremism, is being, ruled by the High Court. And that example clearly shows that sections of the British media, including Guardian, on the liberal media, they are all aligning together, and these voices are becoming strong and strong. So it has become very difficult for the governments in Western capitals. I say, for example, in London here, the government difficulties for government are increasingly every day. The pressures are rising from the public, and one of the current war is you see that Britain has been top ally of America in Afghanistan war, in Iraq war, is now, not taking part in these strikes, and because of the mounting pressures. So you're very right in saying that there has been shift, and this shift is not only on an intellectual level, on all levels. On a general public, there are being protests, regular protests, anti-war movements, is getting strength here. So this is, in brief, there are being campaigns, and not only by people of all walks of life, including academics, journalists, and like the Jewish for peace. So all people are coming together and raising their voice that this war is affecting us all, whether we are in global South, in the West, or whether in Africa or in the Middle East. It is affecting us all. So that the best solution to this is that people have started learning that we should oppose and we should put pressure on our governments, especially in the West and America, and raise the pressure on Israel to stop this war, because this is madness and it's coming from just two people. In the Middle East, Netanyahu, and in America, President Trump. This is their war, and it's got nothing to do with ordinary people here in London, in New York, and all capitals across West and across the global South.
Thank you indeed. Now, since you said it's affecting all of us, and especially the global South, this leads me to you, Mr. Mohammed Krissasi. We're seeing clear economic signals. Every single time Donald Trump goes out and gives a speech, the markets react. And here, rise in energy prices, as Reuters is saying, physical oil prices have surged close to $150 a barrel, while the IEA says supply shock is already among the worst in modern history. The same thing when it comes to global supply chains, which we can see among growing fears of stagflation in the US. So what is this? Is the American economy structurally capable of sustaining a high-cost, open-ended war, perhaps at this scale? Knowing that we have had, other interventions from experts, especially from the Pentagon, saying that the expenditure is normal. If the United States is spending from 1.5 to 2.5, billion a day, this seems like a huge amount of money, but it's peanuts for the United States, as Donald Trump would like to frame it.
Absolutely. I think this is not new when you give the right number. But now, to answer your question, I can say that, if they can sustain it, yes, at the first sight, because you have the monetary dominance of the US dollar. and the US dollar still remain the world primary reserve currency, whatever you want to say, but they can borrow against it to the scale and finance, even to finance the deficit with all their reserve. Now the financial debt, yes, now is backed by the institution like the Federal Reserve Bank. I'm going to be technical a little bit here. The Federal Reserve Bank that will maintain the liquidity and stabilize the market during this shock that you are in right now. And finally, we talk about the energy capacity. Dr. Salhi was mentioning it, yes, but don't forget that America doesn't import oil, they export oil, so therefore they are a major oil and gas producer. The US is less exposed to that external energy shock like the other country. Now, this is what it can sustain, but you have also some challenges. The challenges is the limit of that capacity that I just said now, and you mentioned, for example, the supply chain dependence is very critical. You have also the high public debt that you can sustain the conflict, but for how long? Because it raised the borrowing and the cost of the fiscal pressure that you are going to have right now, and of course the inflation, that the risk is there, and war spending. When you add the supply shock, it increases the likelihood of stagnation, as you mentioned it, and is going to constrain the financial and political finance policy. But I will conclude to say that, yes, it's sustainable in the near term, but progressively harder to maintain the longer and larger conflict that US is facing now.
Thank you, Mohammed Kristasi. Let me get back to you, Dr. Hamoud Salhi. One of the most uncomfortable, perhaps, questions in Washington right now is whether this war is being fought for core U.S. interests or whether U.S. policy has become too closely aligned with the Zionist entity's strategic priorities. Robert Kagan's warning, the repeated ultimatums, and the widening diplomatic damage all suggest a deeper problem of decision-making. So the question is the U.S. still driving this war, or is it being pulled by a strategic agenda it no longer fully controls?
Just another observation from your earlier question. Now, it is also reported, as you may know, that Israel agreed to the 2-week stoppage. And so that's sort of another element in what's happening so far. In terms of your answer, I think we are way into this conflict, that President Donald Trump has no other way but to present this war as his war. And when you hear the media, when you hear the opposition, the Democratic Party or even the Republican, they all pointed out that the tool to end this war, or the means to end this war, is President Donald Trump. So it's very, very clear that Donald Trump is the one who is driving this war, is the one who has the final decision, and more than anything else, he is the one who is leading it in the way he wants to be led. Now, what impact does that have on his on that decision, on giving the appearance that he's leading alone? Certainly, the Israeli lobby is one of them. The Israeli pressure, pressure on him is very important. The role that the Israeli Prime Minister Netanyahu played and continue to play in convincing him that this war is necessary, and then more anything else, that it will be easily done. 100 first hours will be done. We had a chief of staff, for example, who recently said just days ago that Donald Trump was not giving given the right overview of what's happening. This is the equivalent of the chief of government in Algeria, and is the second most important person by the American sort of government standard, is saying that President Donald Trump is not getting the right picture of what's happening. That's one. The other factor that we need to consider, who defines American foreign policy? There are several institutions. I mean, you have the Congress, you have the think tanks, you have the military, all of that. But when you look at who is behind the scenes, who are framing this debate, certainly the Israeli lobby play into it. The impact of this on American elections, the Israeli lobby is very important. Truman, notoriously known for saying when he supported Israel in late 40s, and basically he said the Arabs don't have the vote. For him to continue be the president of the United States. So certainly there is power. There is a strong case to make that this is a war that Israel wants. It's a war by choice. And this whole debate that America has been under threat by Iran for the last 47 years is a myth. The numbers that we threw out there are always sort of part of the, what we call it really, prepared statement or the talking point that they are there. And the narrative is strongly support the Israelis. So all the making of it is this is a war of choice that is for Israel, but in the end, the American president has a say in that, particularly with the tide changing in favor of the Palestinians, in favor of taking America's interest first. And this is well even within the MAGA base, the MAGA Donald Trump's base. We could see that, but up to this point, it's been an Israeli agenda by a large degree, and Donald Trump is leading that agenda with the understanding or with the claim that he has the power to end this and to start this anytime he wants. But we have to wait what's happening. Why this extension again? We know very well that Israel wants the United States to continue this war because it serves Netanyahu's agenda.
Yes, and what agenda? Dr. Al-Qasimi, we are seeing a clear asymmetry in legal narratives. One side is justifying it as preemptive strikes, while the other frames it as actions, or its actions as defensive retaliation. Now, how do we assess legitimacy and proportionality in this context, according to you?
Before I answer this question, is it possible that I say a few words on the Robert Kagan's article, which I recently read?
Yeah, sure.
Is it possible?
Definitely.
Okay, just going off a chorus with what Dr. Sadha and our previous guests were saying, one thing that really struck me in Robert Kagan's article is that he, as you said earlier, he is part of the policymaking circles. He used to be an advisory for the national security of the United States. He is a respected intellectual. We might disagree with him, but at the end of the day, the fact that we're talking about his words shows that he has a lot of credence in American foreign policy. So the article, I think it is very telling that you have an individual like Kagan specifically say that the United States is rogue, okay? He specifically says that the United States is accelerating global chaos, okay? Not stabilizing it. He says that the United States is acting outside of the framework of the international order. Okay, so once we take that into perspective and kind of segue into your question, the idea of asymmetry, legal narratives, we notice that the United States, everything that the United States is doing and saying falls under preemptive framing. Okay, so several security advisors have said that the United States, that Iran did not pose a direct security threat on the United States. Okay. However, the United States ended up using, instead of using the imminent narrative, which is part of international law, imminent strike would be country A has to bomb country B for country A to strike back, right? So the United States, obviously Iran didn't strike the United States proper, okay? But the United States ended up using the threat that Iran has, i.e. nuclear weapons, its militias across the Arab world, from the Houthis to Hezbollah to all the others. It used that reality as a preemptive pretext to strike Iran, okay? Iran, on the other hand, says that it's framing its engagement as self-defense, which, according to international law, Article 51 of the United Nations Charter actually sides with Iran because Iran got bombed first. Therefore, according to the law, according to international law, Iran is acting based on self-defense. However, it is very clear that all three parties, the United States, Iran, and Israel, are violating international law, okay? Because they're all targeting civilian infrastructure, okay? No matter how they want to spin it with the narrative, okay? Iran today bombed Saudi Arabian Jubail petrochemical area, okay? The United States bombed an Iranian school in the first few weeks. Obviously, rest in peace to all of the casualties. So no matter if you want to adopt a self-defense narrative or a preemptive defense narrative, you need to follow that with respecting international law, or international humanitarian law, to be more exact. And neither parties have held up to that standard. And I think, to conclude, I think Kagan's article is revealing, because once you become rogue, and I think Iran is completely rogue as well, okay? Once you become rogue, international law becomes just a hindrance to your own interests. So it just becomes a battle of the narratives. But in reality, as my apologies, I forgot the name of the previous guest who this question was posed to. As he says, the people on the ground are the ones who are the victims of hubris from whether the Israelis, the Iranians, or the Americans.
Mm-hmm. And now, Dr. Irfan Raja, Western media, meanwhile, initially framed this war as defensive. Technically, we didn't have a clear image how to frame it, but then Western media always kept saying that it is a preventive measure, security measure in the interest of the United States and so on. Now we have images of civilian infrastructure strikes, and escalating rhetoric have shifted public perception all over the world. So are we seeing the collapse of narrative control in real time as this is unfolding?
That's a very good question, and it takes back to, it brought the memories of Vietnam War, which was, stopped by, it was a victory of the media. And before answering, I must say media is polemic. So in the West, we often use the phrase Western media, which sometimes echo that perhaps all the media is negative or anti-Muslims, or, for example, they are in favor of war. So we have to understand this, that the Guardian in England, for example, a very reputed newspaper, the Guardian was the newspaper that came forward, and it was an opposition to the illegal war on Iraq on the pretext of weapons of mass destruction. However, you're very right. At the same time, sections of the Western media, I'm in London, so I speak of the Daily, give you an example of the Daily Telegraph, which was very much supportive through its editorial along with other newspapers in favor of attacking Iraq. So we are here in unfortunate moments. We are witnessing unfortunate moments. Once again, the Americans, along with their allies in the West, particularly in the Middle East, Israel, this war is for Israel anyway. Many experts have said it, and there is pile of evidence of it. So what we are seeing is, yes, as soon as the images, are becoming in access to the general public, there is always in any war. I'm not talking about particularly about this current Iran war, but also you take into consideration the ongoing genocide in Gaza that has shifted the rhetoric, that has shifted the public opinion in favor of Palestine. And the media here in the West is most sections of the media, I would say, predominantly are being controlled by the people who are in favor and promoting, supporting war, using pretexts of terrorism and different, and you were saying preemptive. Yes, you're right, because an image has power to change public perception. Now, quickly we learned that during the conflict in Syria, you have remembered that one image of a Syrian toddler drowned in Turkey, seaside, named Alan Kurdi. That image changed. It sent shock waves to the entire world. So the Western media, they know this pretty well. That is why there are no news, I would say almost no news of the carpet bombing in Tehran. And there is most news that all the Iranians are hitting hospitals. But at the same time, when the Israelis were hitting hospitals, killing doctors, killing nurses, killing UN staff, there was almost no news, or there was words and phrases that was very much skillfully designed and systematically used to cover up the heinous crimes, war crimes of Israel. So you are right in putting up this, that images have power, as we know the slogan of a famous Paris magazine, French magazine, the Paris Match: the weight of the words, the shock of the photos. So you're very right. If we start seeing the original, what is happening on ground, it again reminds us of a very famous documentary, a British journalist, John Pilger, who documented this, during the heights of World War. The C.P. Scott, the editor of Guardian, he's told that the public will never know the truth. The day public know the truth, that would be the last day there will be no war. We are having wars because the public is constantly being sold propaganda, being sold like the rhetoric, official rhetoric, that there's a threat, because fear is, the fear game is very successful. It's been sold to American public, it's been sold to Western public. The fear of Russia, the fear of Afghanistan, the fear of Taliban, the fear of ISIS. You go on, and now the fear of Iran. Iran is producing nukes. Even the top experts, I have been watching the last couple of days, the news, especially for research, and you will see that everybody is on this particular point. They agree that for the last not 1-2 months or a year, but for the last several years, Netanyahu is kept on reminding the Western public through Western media that the Iranians are nearly, producing nukes. They are nearly there. It's 1 month away. They are weeks away. And now we come to a point that there is no nuclear weapons at all. This was being sold in case of Iraq war. This was being sold in previous wars. So in brief, yes, you are very right. The perception in West is changing. And this is changing because we are in the era of technology. Yes, there is control. Even TikTok is controlled. But most importantly, what we've seen is young people are being tired of these narratives. And now even an ordinary people you ask in the London and Leeds, in Cardiff, in any city here in London, in England, they would see that, and there's nothing to do with Islam or Muslims. It's to do with the sections of the media. And I'm still not going to demonize all the media or collective media. The sections of the media, they are working closely with governments. They are partners. and they include politicians, they include policymakers. So in brief, the rhetoric has been changed since the Israeli attack on Gaza, and it is changing every day, especially when with every the statement coming from Mr. Trump, President Trump, that we will erase Iran's civilization. We will, it sound like criminals are talking to someone. So the people are not ready to align them with their official rhetorics. Yes.
Thank you. Yes, it is an apocalyptic, let's say, language used by Donald Trump, which kind of underlines the legitimacy of this war. Now, among all this uncertainty, Mr. Mohammed Chris Sassi, the markets are reacting. And when we come to assess the multi-sector supply shocks, what can you say, especially that we're seeing disruption in strategic commodities such as helium, fertilizers, industrial metals? I mean, could this war trigger a multi-sector global supply shock, and who would be the most affected regions?
Well, I will try to answer this complex question that involves what you just said. Yes, this is exactly the kind of setup that can evolve into a multi-sector global supply shock, not just the energy cost. What you are describing, the helium, the fertilizer, the industrial metal, all these points stretch across into layers, to the global economy, which is more dangerous than a single commodity spike. For example, these are fundamental input, not end input. Helium is critical for semiconductor, MRI machine, aerospace. Fertilizer goes directly to the global food production. The industrial metal, nickel, copper, aluminum, these are infrastructure, electronic, and going also to the defense. Therefore, the supply also is geographically concentrated. For example, many of these commodities are are globally diversified. For example, the fertilizer, they are tied to Russia, Belarus, and also the helium is concentrated in the few production, for example, US, Qatar, Algeria. Nickel dominated by Indonesia and Russia. The rare earth, which is really, really critical, evenly depending on basically 90% in China. And all this concentration created the choke point, a conflict affecting even more region. For example, if you go to the logistic and energy that amplify the shock, even when supply exists, you have the shipping cost rise, you have the insurance premium, you have the energy price increase, and this turned what? It turned that the disruption into a broad-based global constraint similar to the one that you have in 1973. But who gets hit the hardest? I think the country that they are very import dependent, the emerging economy, such as North Africa, for example, and also, I'm looking at my note, North Africa, the sub-Sahara country, the South Asia. Why? Because you have this dependence on important food and fertilizer, and also you have the outcome, which is again and again the food inflation, the balance of payment that's stressing, and the political instability risk. Now, I don't want to go further, I want to give you but you really, really, as you said, you have to look at it, at all this disruption that is a supply that is going to go all the multi-sector and geographically as well, and I was trying to describe it. I did a good job there.
Thank you, Mr. Mohammed. It is a multifaceted crisis that will affect everybody, as all the experts underlining, and this war is no longer fought in the Middle East, but we can feel the impact all over continents. You can speak about Europe, you can speak about Africa, and so on. But then, Dr. Hamoud Salhi, amid all this mess, as we discussed earlier, China and Russia have vetoed the UN resolution on Hormuz shipping. And we have Reuters saying Beijing and Moscow are both positioning themselves as indispensable players in this crisis. So is this just diplomatic maneuvering if we come to analyze this development, or a sign perhaps that the war is accelerating a global power shift where Washington no longer sets the terms alone?
No, I think it's too early to make that conclusion with one decision or one usage of the veto right in the United Nations Security Council. I would have to wait to see where this is going. This is not to suggest or to deny the fact that Russia and China, particularly China, appear to be playing a very good role, a supportive role of Iran behind the scene. Russia is less so, I think, because of its involvement in the Ukraine. Both countries want to maintain a presence in the Gulf, in the Arab world, and in particular in this region of the world. Both countries benefit strongly or immensely from their relationship with Iran. So I'm not there to argue that finally they get it. I think what determines the power of these two countries is how much of a role they will play in reaching or helping settle or end this war. I could see that part of the reason is that what they must have calculated. Remember when that the Security Council is a major player, and they having a resolution that would support or be against Iran will be against them. But what you have on the ground now, you have this kind of negotiation, and you have also something there that they could build in. Maybe this is why you have these 2 weeks. What we've seen, what appears to be a red line that the Iranians have put, specifically, end this war forever, reparation, end of sanctions. I think the Iranians have come to be very realistic. One of the, and then the United States came in and also sort of tweeted its position that they are setting the Hormuz Strait opening as a positive development in ending perhaps this war. I think that's what the Russian and the Chinese have seen, that they've seen some kind of political maneuver on the ground that would benefit them. That the Iranians are very, very realistic and objective. They don't mind sharing the cost, sharing the Strait of Hormuz with Oman. The world also may not be sort of opposed to a levy or a charge for the Iranian for those who pass through the strait. I mean, the discussion is about $2 million that each ship will pay, and that amounts to $1 per barrel, meaning that it has not a big impact. So the Iranians are very realistic in that sense, and the Chinese and the Russians saw this as an opportunity to sort of use their veto, so that kind of momentum continues. If the Security Council went ahead and voted against for this resolution, it would actually create conditions not conducive to reaching a resolution peacefully in this conflict. All of this with the understanding that really you could say this 2-week change in a minute, that Donald Trump could use this for his own benefit and could claim tomorrow or in a few hours that, we need to go to war because the Iranians are not playing ball, things like that. So with the caveat there. But and that's where the Russia and China could sort of be looked at, is that how much of their power, of their influence, can affect United States behavior. We are not there yet. Will we be there? I think we have to see how this system, this international order shape up. But certainly, on the other side, the United States will not be losing this one. The United States will be affected. And whether the Chinese and the Russian will take this to its full potential, we have to wait.
Mm-hmm. Well, according to the latest developments, Dr. Hamoud Salhi, it says here that New York Times is quoting Iran accepting the proposal, the Pakistani proposal for a ceasefire for a period of 2 weeks. And at the same time, the United States says the ceasefire could only take effect if they open the Strait of Hormuz. Now, if we hark back to the language that was used by President Donald Trump when making those threats against 90 million people, a country of 90 million people, and here I asked Dr. Khalid Al-Qasimi if we have such language, do you think that there would be concerns, even within the United States institutions, about this rhetoric hinting at the use of unconventional tools to say that a country is going to be wiped out along with its whole civilizations and everything? From a legal and philosophical standpoint, where is the threshold between deterrence signaling and unlawful threat of mass destruction?
Well, first of all, I think we need to remember that the Iranian civilization has existed for thousands of years, and it doesn't matter which US president is in power, that will never happen, that a civilization as successful as Iran could be removed by just one sentence, regardless of the intentions. Because a civilization is not material, it's artistic, it's philosophical, it's art, it's dance, it's all of these. Now, moving from the art or the aesthetic into the politics, I would mention that it is, according to international humanitarian law, if he's saying that a civilization of 90 million is going to be dead, then that language could be interpreted as he will be targeting civilians. Okay. Now, according to international humanitarian law, and specifically the Rome Statute, Article 8, if I recall properly, it criminalizes, obviously, intentionally targeting civilians. This is basic international humanitarian law. Okay. That discourse seems, from a first interpretation, that Donald Trump is stating that he will achieve his goals while putting Iranian civilization, Iranian civilians in harm's way. I honestly think that is optics. Okay. I think what we need to be focusing on more, and this is precisely, I agree a lot with my friend Dr. Salha. We are now, and this has been very clear for the past several years now, okay, we're moving into a new international order, okay? This was clear in the Munich Security Conference in 2026. This was very clear in the Davos meeting, okay, in 2026. Europe was explicitly stating that they are no longer strategically aligning with the United States. We saw this very clearly a few weeks ago. Most European countries closed their airspace for the United States. Okay. 2, we see Europe more explicitly siding with Arabia, the Arab world, for strategic interests. We need to remember that the Strait of Hormuz, and I'm going to link all that back to your question about language and unconventional tools. I'm just building the discussion. Bab al-Mandab Suez Canal, Strait of Hormuz. Those are the three choke points that the Arab world has access to. As we all know, what happened in Russia, the debacle in Russia, and how Europe got bogged down in Russia, it lost a major energy supplier. Okay. Bab el-Mandab is arguably the shortest route from Asia to Europe. So Europe is not going to just easily relinquish or allow the Strait of Hormuz to just simply go out of hand, or allow narratives like we're going to remove the civilization and go unannounced. So that's one. Two, when it comes to going back to the shift of the international order, I think once we kind of zoom out from, you know, the rescue missions that the United States is talking about and the battle of the narratives, I think it is very important to notice that any new international order historically, for it to be cemented or solidified, it was always in the Arab world where that order was solidified. In other words, when the Ottoman Caliphate collapsed, it was in the Arab world that the United States was capable of solidifying its global economic order while using Arab choke points, the Suez Canal, Bab el-Mandab, the Strait of Hormuz, to energize its global industrial economic order. Now, for the past few years, we've been witnessing a restructuring of this new international order. And every new international order or international political order requires a shift in the international economic order. What we're witnessing right now in the Strait of Hormuz is nothing other than a shift in the global economic order. And if the economic order shifts, the political order shifts. These work in symbiosis. So this narrative that I'm going to wipe out the civilization, etc., it's just simply the United States reaffirming what Robert Kagan said, that it is now a rogue state, and any shift in any international system will create major conflicts. So finally, and this is my final point, if Ukraine exhausted Europe, Iran, the war between Iran, the United States, and Israel, wants to exhaust Arab countries. However, through diplomacy, through, if you want, ethical narrative that's not necessarily extremely realpolitik, okay, we will hopefully reach a solution to this with the least casualties possible.
Hopefully. But
sorry if I took too long.
No, it's fine. You mentioned pretty important points there, which leads me to the economic side. And here I have to turn back to you, Mr. Mohammed Krisasi, because if we just highlight the recent rhetoric from Washington, which includes suggestions that countries dependent on Gulf energy, just like Dr. Al-Qasimi was just explaining, especially the Arab world and China and so on. So if they are the ones who are dependent on these choke points, they should be the ones who secure it themselves. So this kind of hints even at control over the resources if we come to analyze it deeper. Now, how are markets interpreting these signals? And are we entering a phase of resource geopolitics overriding international economic norms?
Absolutely. And again, I would like to say, just to try to answer this very, very important question about what is said, what is not said. But the market don't take rhetoric at face value, but the price on the risk that rhetoric become policy, as you are seeing right now. What you are seeing now is less a panic reaction and more gradual repricing of geopolitical risk, especially around the energy and the critical resources, as you said. Now, how the market are interpreting these signals. Number one is the higher geopolitical risk premium, especially on the energy side. Statement about countries securing, as you said, Gulf energy are being read as reduced U.S. willingness to act as a global security guarantor and greater possibility probably of regional competition, other region, I should say, for the supply route. Markets respond by building a risk premium into oil and shipping price, increasing volatility tied to the Middle East headline. And this is not a spike, it's a persistent upwards in uncertainty pricing. The shift from global supplies to, as you said, secure supply thinking. For decades, market assumed the energy flow to whoever pays the market price. But now the assumption is shifted toward energy flow to whoever can guarantee the access. And I think the illustration with the Detroit of Hormuz is playing a role and illustrate what, as you said. Now, how long is going to stay? I don't know, I cannot answer that, but all what I can say is now you have an acceleration of fragmentation. Markets are increasingly pricing a world where supply chains are regionalized, trade is influenced by alliance, and the strength can call for the deglobalization is no longer theoretical, but showing up on what? On capital allocation, on corporate sourcing, on governmental industry policy. And this comes, of course, a point that is very important. The defense and logistics sector gain relative confidence. It is access, it resources, it become contested. Defense opening, rise maritime security, market trend to rotate toward emerging security plays, infrastructure and shipping industry, and we are entering in a resource geopolitical phase. Partially, yes, a full replacement can be done, but the thinking is the key signals markets are watching. Markets are less focused on rhetoric itself, but more on the following through the military posture change in the Gulf, the formal policy shift, like the sanction, the export control, and the security guarantees, the allied response like Europe, Asia, securing their independent supply lines, and of course, this rhetoric is turning for at the end of the day, the price is structuring the supply and security. And this is where we are right now, and I'm sorry if I'm very technical on this point.
No, it's fine. Let me include Dr. Raja here when it comes to reality on the ground. Dr. Raja, there were early expectations, particularly in Washington, of some kind of an internal destabilization in Iran. But instead, we're seeing signs of popular mobilization and societal cohesion. So does this suggest that Western policymakers fundamentally misread the depth of Iranian national identity and their ability to rally under external pressure?
This is once again a very significant question and very interesting point of view for your viewers in the West, in the Middle East and Global South. Yes, to an extent, because recently I would take back your viewers to a really relevant example when the American, Tucker Carlson was interviewing American Senator Ted Cruz. And he asked a question, how many people are in America? And surprisingly, the government, one of the part of policymakers who actually was, in favor of attacking Iran, was embarrassingly didn't know how many people are in Iran, how much is population. So on that, you can see that, the arrogance that is, deeply rooted in American society, not on a whole, but among officials. And this is very much seen in the Hollywood films talking about Arabs, labeling them like as backward, uneducated, and linking the Sahara, like desert, with camels and all that. There's a very readable book for which is very relevant to how, when, and why the continuous misreading of Americans and the Western politicians of the Middle East. For the last 50 plus years, they are waging war after war in the Middle East. And these wars we all know that the wars are not for regime change, because they were the one who installed these regimes. They were the one who supported these regimes. This is all a game for oil, game for, taking national resources. So yes, there's a book, Real Bad Arabs, how Hollywood vilifies a people. So this is rooted in Orientalism. A Palestinian American scholar, Edward Said, a concept of Orientalism, how West and America see as Arabs and people in distant land as, backward, uneducated, threat, and pose them as threat to Western civilization, which are based on arrogance. There is no such thing as superiority, people are saying. And if you talk about in recent times, one of the leading American scholars, Kishore Mehbubani, told us years ago that, the rise of Global South. So coming back to this, you are very right in pointing out that initially Netanyahu directly talked to the Iranian people that we are coming to rescue you. Perhaps they were living in third world, because and nobody talks about I'm talking about the Western officials, a country that has been illegally forced to live under sanctions. What for? It just reminds oil for food program. What a nasty phrase it is. I'm sorry to say this. Why this their oil, Iraqi oil, and they were being that oil is being stolen openly and under covering, the words and fancy words and phrases. So once again, we are seeing here is yes, it's misread, but actually for most people, like they've constantly traveling into Middle East, and we are in the era of technology. The whole world is like, we use the global village phrase, and I'm afraid many American politicians, including the British, and they have close relationships with people in different countries, like unofficially, there has been stories about, the past British Prime Minister, for example, Tony Blair, and other people who were being served as advisors to the governments in Middle East. So their knowledge of Middle East is pretty much considerable, which pretty much better. It's just not that misreading is when they want to wage wars, illegal wars, they would like to cover up their narratives, and that's where the official rhetorics are being invented, promoted, and supported through their arms in the media. That's why we have this phrase embedded media. So yes, they have misread it, and once again, you're pretty right in saying that they have mobilized the whole Iranian community. You can see the stories are coming up through, although there's a lot of control, but stories are coming up from Tehran. I was listening to Professor Morandi in University of Tehran, a leading figure and a commentator, that how these young people, Gen Z people, are bringing up stories on what is actually happening is that it has united the Iranian people. As our guest, respected guest said just earlier on, that Iran is a civilization thousands of years old, and one of the oldest civilizations in the world, and America is just a child in terms of civilization. And it's always, unfortunately, coming from the American officials, regime change, because people they don't like, are being presented through the Oriental lens as backwards, terrorist, extremist, so and so. And it reminds me of Professor Noam Chomsky, who once famously said that, what about if the Iranians come over and tell Americans, oh, we need a regime change here. Let us tell you, because there's a lot of concerns in American public. There is growing homelessness. No one can deny in America. People are, living in not in tents. If the Arabs are, Arabs are in their Hollywood movies portrayed as living in tents. What about people living in the vans in America? So all these, as earlier on I said that, ordinary people in the street, whether they are in New York, in London, in Paris, or in any South Asian country or global South, they have nothing to do with these wars. They are peace-loving peoples, and that's what you see. Thousands and thousands of people, they every time come up and they march in London, in other capitals, despite the fact that there are bans and there are a lot of pressures, mounting pressures on the public. Do not take part in these rallies. People are, because everyone is affecting. So the concept that they mislead is deeply rooted in Orientalism. I just would like to, if you allow me, I would like to give one example. Back in 2009, there were protests in Iran, and unfortunately, there was one video event viral, the death of Nadar Agha Sultan during that protest. So now that video, just for argument's sake, that video won the best prize in America, and everybody talked about it in the television screens, on newspaper media, different forms of media. This story was the top story. At the same time, on the same week, there was a death of Ian Tomlinson in London, there was a G20 protest, and during that protest, a policeman hits him. He died of heart attack, but that story was covered up. So there is always double standards in the West. The bad guys are the Arab people. People are living in faraway places, and the good guys are in America. Good guys are in the West.
Thank you, Dr. Irfan. Point is clear. Unfortunately, we have not enough time to continue with this, but you draw the picture really clearly. And now, briefly, every single guest here need to give me a brief answer to these questions. Dr. Hamoud Salhi, if we come to talk about diplomacy, is there any safe exit, or this is going to linger?
Safe exit is a little bit difficult, but let me rephrase it. I don't think Donald Trump, from what we've seen so far, has a choice because he's running out of time. The War Power Resolution Act stipulates that if the United States is engaged in a military conflict or at war without informing Congress, getting approval of the Congress, the United States must withdraw in 60 days. Those 60 days expires on April 28th. The war starts on February 28th, March 28th, February 28th. Then the president can extend it for an additional 30 days. That puts you in May. That's a luxury that Donald Trump doesn't have. Why? Because we are approaching the elections. And here another problem. The problem is the oil prices, the gas price, the fertilizer prices, what Dr. Sassi mentioned. Those are a huge burden on American customers, and Trump doesn't want to get them as an issue in the upcoming election. He knows very well if he loses both chambers, he might be under a huge problem of being impeached. That he doesn't want to. Finally, this is an off-ramp for him, and I think he takes it because the last analysis, what you've seen in the rescue mission, Donald Trump must have reached the conclusion that, we had 100 people there looking at this. They must have the conclusion that troops on the ground is not feasible and that the United States has to find a way of getting out. The fact that the Donald Trump is able to take this as a win, saying that the Iranians accepted his plan, which in fact the Iranians might dispute because they had their 10 points. So that gives him an off-ramp, and he looks good getting out now than later.
Thank you indeed, Professor Hamoud Salhi, for all these insights. Musta'ar Mohammed Chris Sassi, briefly please, what if this war continues? What is the real risk for Western populations in the coming weeks or months?
Well, you are asking very difficult question, but I will come with a simple answer. The bottom line is the Western, they are going to expect the cost of living. They are going to have disruption and a lot of systemic shortage. And then what I am hoping that, like in 1973, after all this mess is done, the economy is going to be back on the track, but in between, they are going to suffer. And all of this because Mr. Trump gave of choice, thinking that again and again, like my predecessor was saying, that is going to be an easy. No, war is never easy. You can declare war, but you never know how it's going to end and how much it's going to cost. And always the same result is at the kitchen table. This is what you are looking, and why it's so expensive, why it's not coming, is because of the stupidity of war.
Thank you indeed, Mr. Mohammed Kristansi, for all the insights and for being with us here in the studio.
Thank you so much.
And I thank all my guests, Dr. Hamoud Salhi. Thank you so much, Dr. Irfan Raja. Thank you indeed for agreeing to be with us tonight. And the same thanks goes to Dr. Khalid Al-Qasimi, Associate Professor of International Relations and Political Philosophy at the American University at the Emirates. And also, I think Mr. Glenn, who could not join us due to a technical problem he was having. Maybe another time we can listen to his point of views. And as the conflict is now reshaping energy markets, stressing alliances and testing the law of war and exposing the limits of coercion, here we are asking central questions that remain unanswered until now. If the ultimatum keeps changing, the costs keep rising, and the legal and political case keeps weakening. And that's it from me, ladies and gentlemen. Until next time, have a good one.